the judges in rural counties don't see as much crime. The other part is that when you have elected judges, which we do, which I think is a good system, we tend to somewhat reflect the values of the community, the people who elected us. But what they were trying to do was to have judges look at sentencing in certain ways, trying to get them to focus on using prison for more violent offenders. And the other thing, so they had this presumption: first and second degree felonies were presumed to go to prison. Fourth and fifth degree felonies were presumed not to go to prison. And then the other thing they did was they passed a law that said that the purpose of criminal sentencing is to punish the offender and to protect society. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that when I say the purpose of criminal sentencing is to punish the offender and protect society, that is more of a the legislature is saying to judges, you should be more concerned about protecting society and punishing the offender than you should be about rehabilitating the offender. Okay. Not that you can't be concerned about rehabilitation, but that your purpose should be first to protect society and punish the offender.
First of all, when this defendant appears before you, he has been charged. You had nothing to do with that.
That's right.
All right. But that raises a real good question, because that 3 category, the one right in the middle, that's kind of gray, Judge. I mean, by your own, isn't it kind of gray? I mean, it's...
Well, they're gray in this sense. A felony 3 tends to be a felony that is usually not having as much violence in the background, in the defendant's conduct. Right. And usually is a case that doesn't carry quite the same threat of harm to somebody else. If you're asking me, are felony 3s harder to sentence?
Well, that was going to be my next question. Doesn't that put you in a tougher position than one
right?
And 5.
Probably, yeah. I would suspect that that's probably true. I mean, I'm trying to think. The last time I did sentencings yesterday. We're recording this on Friday, May 22nd. I actually did sentencings on May 21st. Trying to think if I had a third-degree felony. I did have one on the docket, but it was. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're asking me, do third-degree felonies pose more of a problem when I'm thinking about sentencing because they're not as bad as 1 or 2, but they're not as they're worse.
On its face, it sort of looks that way.
I think you're probably right about that. I don't think about what I look at when I sentence a person for a crime. Is I usually look at the first 2 things I look at are the history the person's had with the criminal justice system, if any, and the impact upon the victim. Okay, that's the first 2 things I'm usually looking at. And what I'm trying to figure out is, if the person has an extensive history with the criminal justice system, then usually as a person is probably going to, you're probably not, in order to protect society and to punish the offender, that's probably a person you're going to send to prison, because other people have probably tried to do things with that person and they haven't worked out. But the other thing you look at is the impact on the victim. I mean, sometimes the impact on the victim is so horrible that that even if the person has no previous criminal record, and even if the person is otherwise a law-abiding person, because they committed this act, they need to be punished.
Sure.
If, for example, an example of that might be somebody who gets intoxicated, drives, and kills somebody. Then, even though they may have been a law-abiding person, the impact, the impact on the victim was
those are obviously tough ones,
right?
But,
So I guess what I'm saying is that.
Well, what's the I mean, all right. I mean, I sort of boxed you in there. I came to the conclusion of the third. So let me maybe be more fair if I ask you the question this way: what's the hardest? What is the hardest to sentence?
The hardest to sentence is probably a defendant who has a criminal record. But not an extensive criminal record, but a criminal record, who is unemployed, male or female, who dropped out of school, who probably has some drug activity in their background. And the reason why they're kind of hard to sentence is because you don't know what's going to work. And you also, on the one hand, they may have been exposed to the opportunity to get help, and they have, to do other things before they got to you. But on the other hand, you're wondering to yourself, how can I prevent this person from just becoming,
Sure.
going through the system again and again and again. I think the easiest to settle.
That's a fair contrast. I mean,
yeah, the easiest to sentence are probably people who've committed horrible acts and have horrible records, because you know to yourself, this person's going to prison. It's just how long it's going to go.
Sure.
And there's some people. I mean, I think I've told you this in the past, but I once told a reporter that during the course of my experience as a judge, I've seen a few evil people. Not many, but I've seen a few.
Yeah.
I've seen a few mean people, just downright mean people. Not very many, but a few. But I've also seen a lot of people make bad decisions. They make bad choices. They make a choice to commit an act that was just, for want of a better word, it was a dumb thing to do.
Yeah. I imagine that's.
And most people, by the way, self-correct. What I mean by that is most people, if we probably well over 50% of them, if they come through my court for a felony, we'll never see them again.
Well, that's good to hear, because frankly, I think the perception of the general population may not be the case.
No, I think that you're right. That may be a perception,
because we and I think part of it, Judge, is the recession we're in right now.
Sure.
We keep hearing about there'll need to be cuts.
Right.
And prisons are state institutions.
Right.
And I think your discussion there, which was excellent, I mean, I now understand it better, and I certainly hope our viewers do, about 1 and 2 and 3 and 5.
Right.
I guess you can't put everybody in prison.
Oh, no,
you're
you
not
can't.
going to have enough room.
We're already at 125% of capacity in the system. You cannot put everybody in prison. I mean, you could not build enough prisons to put every prisoner in Ohio in prison and guard those people.
Yeah.
I mean, it costs you about $24,000 a year. It costs more money to put a person in prison than it does to send them to college at a state-supported university.
Well, I fully understand that. But
it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And what you got to realize about prisons is that over the 35-year period, let's say the prison's built in 2009. Okay, over the next 35 years, only 10% of that cost will be construction. 90% will be operation.
Right.
So it costs a lot of money to operate prisons. So no, you couldn't put everybody in prison, and that's why. And most people, like I said, well over half the people we see we'll never see again. The problem is, however, the flip side of that is about maybe 5 to 15% of defendants cause a lot of cases. In other words, they're repeating cases. Like, I had a case in front of me recently where a guy had been arrested something like 25 times as an adult, and 4 or 5 times before that as a juvenile. So that one person took a lot of resources. And the problem that we have is we don't always know who that person is when we sentence them for the first time,
I don't see how you
or even the first 2 or 3 times.
We're out of time, but as usual, I thank you very much for coming in. There was you've touched on things today that somewhat academic for us. I mean, you it's second nature. You do it every day, but this all sort of ties together on the category of felonies and whatnot. Well, again, thank you for being our guest on Law Talk. To actually see inside Judge Kimbler's court in this episode of Law Talk, go to www.CZ-CLEP, or what we call CZ-CLEP.org. I am John Celebrezze, and on behalf of CZ-CLEP, I thank you for tuning into Law Talk.